So now we're going to have a look at a continued question for advanced mechanics. So this continues from the question we just did. We have the same parabola as given. We are now asked to find the time of flight of the projectile in this case. So in the last question we just calculated the initial velocity. So now using that we need to calculate the time of flight. Well, we have a shorthand formula for time of flight. The time of flight is -2 times the initial velocity in y divided by gravity. This is where g is minus 9.8. So all we need in this formula is the initial velocity in y, and then we can calculate the time of flight using this shorthand formula. So we'll draw a little vector diagram to do the initial velocities. This is 75 degrees, this is 48.5. This is initial velocity in y. So we're going to use sine. Sine of 75 is the initial velocity in y over 48.5. This tells us the initial velocity in y is 48.5 times sine of 75. So now u of y, we're going to have to round here. We've already rounded once to get the 48.5. We're actually going to be rounding again. Because this is physics, it doesn't really matter. Precision in these types of questions is not particularly important. So we get 46.847 ... So this means the initial velocity in y is about 46.85 to 2 decimal places meters per second. So this is the first result we have. This now has to be plugged into the time of flight formula to find the time of flight. So time of flight is equal to -2 times 46.85 divided by minus 9.8. -2 times 46.85 divided by minus 9.8. This gives me 9.56122. 9.56122 ... So therefore, the time of flight is about 9.56 to 2 decimal places seconds. And this is the answer that we're after here. This is a slightly interesting question because you had to have found the initial velocity magnitude first. And that's very common in these types of questions. These types of questions often start with one thing and they'll say find this, and then they'll get you to find another thing. Harder variants of questions won't tell you which thing to find first. They will just give you the graph and say find the time of flight. Then you have to know to find things. The best way to do this, try to find whatever you can. Right? Whenever you're doing physics questions like this, if they're a little more complicated, try to find any information you can and go from there. Often finding one thing will lead you to finding something else. Finding that might lead you to what you're after.